Kane Calloway had a talent that nobody around him ever noticed. It was not a talent for solving problems quickly, or for telling jokes that made people laugh, or for remembering names. His talent was much simpler than that, and far more important. Kane Calloway knew how to disappear while standing perfectly still in a room full of people. For 8 years, he had worked at the same warehouse on the edge of the city, wearing the same gray jacket, eating the same lunch at the same hour, and speaking only when someone asked him a direct question. Nobody asked him much. He answered in short sentences, never offered an opinion unless pressed, and left exactly when his shift ended. To his coworkers, he was simply the quiet guy from the loading dock, a name that suited him fine, because his real name had not been spoken aloud in a very long time. Kane had not always been quiet. Once, his voice had carried across mountains and forests, and an entire nation of wolves had bowed their heads when he walked into a room. He had been a king, the strongest alpha his bloodline had produced in 3 centuries, the kind of leader other packs respected without question. That life had ended the night his own council turned against him, stripped him of his title, and forced him to flee his homeland. He had survived. He always survived. But surviving had taught him something his old life never had: how to be invisible. So he came to this city, took a job that asked nothing of him, and spent 8 years making sure that nobody, not old enemies, not former allies, not even the wolves who still searched for him, would ever think to look for the legendary Alpha King behind the tired eyes of a warehouse supervisor. It worked, mostly, until the night everything changed. Mara Whitlock had joined the warehouse 2 years earlier, transferred from another branch after a disagreement with her old manager that she never fully explained. She was sharp, organized, and impossible to ignore, which made her the exact opposite of Kane. From her first week, she noticed him the way she noticed everything, quickly, and without saying much about it. She watched him lift crates that should have needed 2 people. She watched him appear calm during emergencies that left everyone else panicking. She never asked him about it directly. Instead, she simply started leaving an extra coffee on his desk on cold mornings, the way she might leave one for any coworker she respected. Kane never thanked her with words. He thanked her by remembering, without being asked, the days she needed help finishing her reports before a deadline. Over 2 years, this became their quiet rhythm. Small kindnesses traded without explanation, the closest thing to friendship either of them allowed themselves at work. Neither of them expected that rhythm to matter beyond these walls. Then the disappearances began. It started with small, easy-to-dismiss things. A night shift worker who didn't show up for 2 days, then returned with no memory of where he had been. A delivery van found parked at an odd angle outside the warehouse gates, its driver gone, never located. Rumors moved through the building faster than facts did. Some blamed a gas leak. Others blamed simple bad luck. Mara, who paid attention to patterns the way other people paid attention to gossip, noticed that every incident happened within walking distance of the warehouse, always at night, always near the old loading yard that bordered the forest at the edge of the city. She mentioned it to Kane during a slow afternoon shift, half as a joke, half because something about it genuinely unsettled her. "You ever notice all of this weirdness happens right around here?" she asked, nodding toward the yard outside the window. "Like something's circling the building." Kane's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. He recognized the pattern immediately, though he said nothing about it. He knew the scent of rogue wolves when their territory markings crept too close to human spaces. He knew the particular kind of silence that settled over a place right before trouble arrived. For 8 years, he had ignored every instinct telling him to act, choosing instead to stay hidden. This was the first time those instincts refused to be ignored. "Probably coincidence," he said simply, and went back to work. But that night, instead of going straight home, he walked the perimeter of the yard alone, reading signs that no ordinary person would have noticed. Broken branches bent at unnatural angles, the faint, unfamiliar presence of wolves who did not belong to any pack he recognized. Someone, or something, was watching the warehouse. He didn't yet know why. He found his answer 2 nights later, when Mara stayed late to finish an inventory report and left the building after dark, alone. Kane was already gone for the day when his phone buzzed with an alert from the warehouse security system. a feature he barely used but had set up out of old habit. Someone had triggered the motion sensors near the loading yard, far outside normal hours. He almost ignored it. He had spent 8 years training himself to ignore things like this, to let normal life continue without him stepping in. But something about the timing, combined with Mara's name still listed as the last person to badge out, made the decision for him before he consciously made it himself. He arrived at the yard within minutes, moving faster than any ordinary man should have been able to. What he found stopped him cold. Mara, standing near her car, surrounded by 3 strangers who had stepped out from the tree line, their postures too still, too deliberate, to belong to ordinary trespassers. Mara's voice was steady, but Kane could hear the edge of fear underneath it as she tried to talk her way past them, insisting she had nothing worth taking, that they should let her go. The strangers were not interested in her car or her belongings. They were rogue wolves, part of a growing group that called itself the Hollow Pack, and they had not come for Mara at all. They had been watching the warehouse for weeks, following faint traces of a presence they could not quite identify, a presence far older and stronger than anything they had encountered in this city. Mara had simply walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. Kane stepped out of the shadows without hurrying, his calm announcing itself before his words did. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying a weight that made all 3 strangers turn at once, their confidence faltering the moment they looked at him directly. For a long moment, nobody moved. The strangers studied him with growing unease, sensing something underneath his ordinary clothing and tired posture that did not match the rest of him. One of them took a half-step back without seeming to realize he had done it. Kane did not raise his voice, did not threaten them, did not need to. He simply held their gaze, steady and unblinking, the same way he had once held the gaze of entire war councils into silence. "Leave," he said, "now." It was not a request. Something in his tone reached past their hesitation and settled directly into instinct, the same ancient instinct that told every wolf, no matter how rebellious, to recognize true authority when it stood in front of them. The 3 strangers exchanged uncertain glances, then retreated into the tree line without another word, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Mara stood frozen, staring at Kane as though seeing him for the first time. "What was that?" she finally managed. "People who shouldn't have been here," Kane said simply, already guiding her toward her car. "You're safe now, go home." She wanted to ask more, needed to ask more, but something about his expression told her this was not the moment. She nodded, got into her car and drove away, glancing at him once in her mirror before he disappeared from sight. Kane stood alone in the yard long after she left, knowing the quiet life he had built for himself had just ended. The Hollow Pack had seen him. Worse, they would talk, and word traveled fast in circles like theirs. Within days, rumors would reach every pack still searching for the missing Alpha King, including the one pack he feared most, the one now ruled by Director Voss, the man who had taken his throne 8 years ago and never stopped hunting for proof that Kane was still alive. Kane was right to worry. Within a week, the city began to change in ways only he could fully recognize. Strangers appeared on quiet streets, watching too carefully, asking questions disguised as small talk. The warehouse itself became a center of unusual activity, as both the Hollow Pack and Voss's enforcers converged on the one place rumors placed the missing king. Kane felt the net tightening around him, and he understood that hiding was no longer an option. If he did nothing, the conflict between these 2 forces would spill into the streets, and ordinary people, people like Mara, like his coworkers, like the entire unsuspecting city, would be caught in the middle of a war that was never theirs to begin with. So for the first time in 8 years, Kane Calloway chose to stop disappearing. He arrived at the warehouse early one morning, before most of the staff had clocked in, and waited. He did not have to wait long. Voss's enforcers arrived first, moving through the yard with the practiced confidence of men who believed they held all the power. Behind them, members of the Hollow Pack arrived from the opposite direction, drawn by the same rumors, each group eyeing the other with open suspicion. Kane stepped into the open space between them, unhurried, his presence alone enough to draw every eye in the yard. "You've all been looking for me," he said, his voice calm, but unmistakably commanding. Here I am. The reaction was immediate. Voss's enforcers straightened, some instinctively lowering their heads in old habit before catching themselves. The Holopack members, who had expected to find a hidden, weakened fugitive, instead found themselves facing someone whose authority radiated without effort, without threat, simply by existing. "I'm not here to reclaim a throne," Kane continued, his eyes moving steadily across both groups. "I gave that up the night your master decided loyalty meant less to him than power, but I will not allow either of you to turn this city into a battlefield. The people here have nothing to do with our history, and I will not let them pay for it." One of the enforcers stepped forward, clearly intending to test him, to prove that rumors had exaggerated his strength. Kane met his gaze without flinching, without raising a hand, and held it until the enforcer's resolve broke on its own, his shoulders dropping in quiet, reluctant surrender. It was not strength that won the moment. It was the same unshakable certainty that had once made him a king in the first place, a certainty that needed no force behind it, because it had never needed force to be real. The Holopack, watching this exchange, recalculated their plans entirely. Rather than risk conflict with a king who showed no fear and no aggression, their leader offered something neither group had expected: a wary truce. They would withdraw from the city in exchange for Kane's word that he would not move against them, an agreement Kane accepted immediately, knowing that peace, however uneasy, was worth more than any victory built on violence. Voss's enforcers, having seen the futility of their mission, retreated as well, carrying word back to their master that the missing king was not weak, not hidden, and not interested in reclaiming what he had lost, only in protecting what he had quietly built instead. By the time the warehouse staff arrived for their regular shift that morning, the yard was empty again, as though nothing unusual had happened at all. Only Mara, arriving early as always, caught a glimpse of Kane standing exactly where she had left him days earlier, looking somehow lighter than she had ever seen him. She approached carefully, studying his face. "You're not just the quiet guy from the loading dock, are you?" Kane allowed himself something rare, a small, genuine smile. "Not anymore," he said. He told her everything that morning, sitting on the loading dock as the sun rose fully over the yard, no longer worried about who might overhear. Mara listened without interrupting, processing a truth far stranger than anything she could have imagined, yet somehow unsurprised by it. It explained too much about him to feel impossible. Kane did not return to his old throne. He had no interest in ruling again, no desire to reclaim a crown built on betrayal. Instead, he stayed exactly where he was, in the same warehouse, on the same loading dock. Except now he no longer needed to disappear. His coworkers slowly began to notice things about him they had somehow missed for 8 years. His quiet humor, his steady reliability, the calm strength that had been there all along, simply unnoticed. For the first time since he was a young man, learning to lead an entire nation of wolves, Kane Calloway walked through his ordinary life as himself, fully seen, fully known, by the people who mattered most around him. He had spent 8 years convinced that hiding was the only way to keep the people near him safe. It took one dangerous night to teach him the truth. Real strength was never about staying invisible. It was about choosing, even after everything he had lost, to stand exactly where he was and let himself finally be seen.